You know that a person has lived a worthy life when they die and the world mourns. You know when someone has lived an unworthy life when they die and the world cheers. When a serial killer kills all these people, it becomes biology. And when someone becomes successful, it becomes who they surround themselves with.
So, Helen, welcome to my podcast. And hello, everyone. Please introduce yourself and what do you do to our audience?
Yeah. My name is Helen Garcia. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm a therapist who helps creative entrepreneurs. I've been in private practice for less than a month now, but I specialize in therapist practices. I've been practicing for about 3 years. Um, it's I also have a podcast and I consult for different businesses and brands, but I think my greatest passion is helping creatives unlearn perfectionism because it's a journey that I've been through before.
Interesting. Yeah. And how was your journey being a therapist? Like, where did you start?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I struggled a lot with depression, anxiety, and self-harm. So I battled a lot with that. My parents and I immigrated here. I'm the oldest in my family of two. We immigrated here when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And then something happened when I was in high school where I started to realize that I just looked and acted differently from a lot of my peers. I had higher energy than the average human. I'm very type A. Um, but I felt really alone in my struggle as like a first generation immigrant. I was the first in my family to ever go to college in America. I had to go through the college system on my own. And along that line, I think I started dating a guy who recommended therapy to me because he noticed that I would push people away. And then it started this journey of just asking those questions. And then when I was in college, we didn't have a lot of money, so my parents and I both had to take out loans for to pay me through college. So I worked at a coffee shop, and people would come to the coffee shop every day just to talk to me. And those customers would stay for 5, 6 hours just telling me about their life. And they became regulars. I got a lot of tips. And one person said to me, Helen, you're really easy to talk to. I think you should become a therapist. And then halfway through grad school, COVID happened, and I realized that I had a lot of trauma that I needed to process. And I don't know, I think part of it is just wanting to help people and wanting to be there for people in the same way. Because I struggled alone for so long that I want to help people understand that they don't have to do it alone, that there's someone there that can help them.
Yeah, very interesting. And
Yeah,
how were your college years? I'm not very aware about the American
sure.
college culture. So, how was that?
So, American college is very different from, I think, a lot of different colleges because you have so many options. You can go to an elite college where the main focus is not partying, it's mainly academics. I went to what's called a liberal arts school, which is you get to choose the type of education that you want. So I went in as a molecular biology, biochemistry major because my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse. And I thought that I wanted to follow in their path, but I would fail all of my college classes. I failed biology, I failed chemistry, I failed organic chemistry, and I was put on academic probation and I was about to lose my scholarship. In that moment, I had a teacher in my biochemistry class pull me aside because I would always stop by her class. I didn't understand, I couldn't connect the dots. And at the time, I was student body president of my freshman class. I was doing social justice work. I was volunteering. I was doing a lot of graphic design stuff on the side.
Mhm.
That ate up most of my time. Biochemistry was, I hated it. And when you hate something, you don't really want to invest your time and energy into it. And so college for me was a place of discovery because I had teachers and professors that were willing to say to me, your talents are more relational than they are scientific and research oriented. I think you should consider going into sociology, the study of society. psychology, the study of the human brain, and start to understand that. So, halfway through my freshman year, I switched majors probably 5 or 6 times. I took English classes, philosophy classes, science classes. I just ate up information and I wanted to discover who I was. And I think as humans, we're constantly searching for the meaning of life. Why are we here? What were we created to do? How am I supposed to do it? So, all of these questions would pop up in my head in college. And I was ridiculed by my parents actually throughout college because we're immigrant parents. And so the main proclivity is to make enough money to survive. And so I was chasing my interests when my culture and my upbringing told me to chase what makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of my life was battling this argument internally because it wasn't my parents' fault. Like, it makes sense. I understand where they're
Mhm.
coming from. You have to make enough money to make a living. But I also knew that if I stayed in a career that didn't bring me happiness, I would eventually lose my job because my brain doesn't work that way. I'm extremely creative, I'm extremely relational. And so college was such a blessing for me because it gave me the opportunity to really battle with those questions. And I think that if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you right now.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting answer, because I think that phase where you question everything about your life, like why I'm here and
Mhm.
what's my purpose, it mostly comes
Mhm.
in these formative years when you're in college and you're
Yeah.
going through sudden change. You can see, you now start to realize like there's a whole new world out there which is different from the school and schooling I have done so far. So it suddenly
Yes.
hits you
So
like,
different. It's so
yeah,
different from because in high school, elementary school, you spend 8 hours in school and then you go home. College, you're there, you're getting an education all the time. You're learning from your peers, you're learning from your teachers. You actually have space away from your family if you chose to go to college outside of your hometown. Isn't that what happened to you?
yeah,
Didn't you move? Yeah. Can
it's
you
very
tell me your
similar.
story too?
Yeah, it was very same for me. Like in my college years, I was having the same doubts, because essentially I got comparatively more freedom than I had in school.
Mm.
So there were freedom of choices and freedom of path. Like, what should I pick now? Where should I go on?
Mm.
And I felt like the course I'm currently studying, it's not going to help me in career anyway.
Mhm.
So there was now abundance of option, and thanks to the internet, I can learn anything which I want if I put enough time in it. So I was very curious about different things, like should I try this, should I try that, and always in the back of my head there was this thought like I have to make enough money to sustain myself at least,
Mm.
because I know
Yes.
my parents can like take care of themselves, but for me, I have to take care of myself.
Mm.
So
So true.
there's an interesting shift now. You start to see world differently. You can see like what activities are
Yes.
wasting your time, and what friends you should hang out with, and even
Mhm.
your conversations change, because
Yes.
in the initial years of college it was all about dating, like
Mhm.
who you want to date,
Yes.
who you want to hang out with, which
Yep.
party you are going to. And
Mhm.
suddenly after first semester it was like everything changed, and I realized
Mhm.
the I'm stuck now here. If I keep doing this, it's gonna like be very harmful, and I will waste my time, whatever time I have here. So I started finding different things, and
Yeah,
then
I didn't.
there's this questions of like what's his life, and so I
Uh-huh.
dwell more into it, like where can I find answers. So from religion to philosophy to science, everything, I tried everything. So I have a question
Yes.
for you here. I was talking with someone and they said, why you should worry about these questions when you have limited time on earth? Why not just enjoy, like the hedonistic kind of thing? So what's your take on this?
That's well, how can you know what a good life is if you've never battled with these questions, you know?
Yeah.
I also think too, like I posted a reel on Instagram the other day called Why Dreaming Big Doesn't Really Help People. And we start hearing the statement dream big when we're younger. The problem with that is like you don't know who you are when you're 15 or
Mm-hmm.
16, where dreaming big is important. You should aspire for more. But how do you know what more of if you don't know the answers to your own questions about why am I here? And I think I'm my faith is Christianity, so I really believe that like God has inserted dreams into the human heart and it's our job to search for it and to find it. And so growing up, like you would hear these big statements, dream big, dream, believe, achieve,
Hmm.
but no one ever taught you how to dream, what to dream
Yeah.
of, how to tackle those questions. And so I would say to your friend, to each their own, but I also understand that embedded within humanity and the fabric of humanity is a desire to matter. And at the end of your life, you want to matter. And how can you understand what matters to you and how to matter if you've never understood your own purpose in life?
Hmm.
Because you can chase money, you can chase the millions of dollars, but you can probably think of countless people in this life who have had cash and
Yeah.
cars and all of these material possessions, but people are glad that they're alive. There's a quote by John Steinbeck that says, "You know that a person has lived a worthy life when they die and the world mourns. You know when someone has lived an unworthy life when they die and the world cheers."
Yeah. And I think both of these aspects are very interesting. Like people mourning for you when you die, and people cheering for you when you die. I think
Mm-hmm.
there are people who want to be on these extreme, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
people who struggle most, like they will be forgotten after they die. So there's
Mm-hmm.
the wide space in between, like between mourning and between cheering. Like people won't remember me even after I die. So that's a
Yeah,
very weird place to be in.
it is a weird place to be in. I used to rock climb and I was at the rock climbing gym and there was this guy hitting on me at the rock climbing gym. He's like, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a therapist." And usually when I tell people that, they go, "Oh," because they think that I'm psychoanalyzing them. And he later asked me, he said, "What's your approach to the way that you work with clients and the way that you work with people?" And I told him, I said, I like to remind them that they're going to die soon. And he looked at me, he's like, "That's so morbid. Why would you do that?" And I looked at him and I said, "You have to think about that. You have to, because you never know when you're going to die. And so, what do you want to create with your life? Like, what do you want to do with your life?" And he looked at me almost dumbfounded. And I don't think we think about that enough,
Yeah.
you know? Like, I remember when I was 5, my grandpa died suddenly. And I remember being faced with death at such an early age. But I'm thankful for that because it gave me the courage to walk in creativity and the courage to really live my life and to ask those questions. Because people who have never tasted death or have never felt death, they think that they have forever. And then one day they don't, you know?
Yeah. And very similar incident happened with me. Like my grandma died at around 5 or 6 years old, when I was 5 or 6 years old,
Hmm.
and I still haven't processed that feeling which I felt in that moment. It was very
Mm.
strange to me, and I was just because everything suddenly changed around me. Like my father, what I used to perceive him as that up to that point was a strong man who's like I knew up to that point that if he's here, everything's gonna be all right.
Mm.
And it was nighttime. I distinctly remember, and she passed away, and I could see in my father's eyes that he's broken, like he's feeling all that emotion and
Wow.
everything.
How did you know as a child? Like, what did he do? What did he
I could see
look
him cry,
like?
and I was. It was first time seeing him cry, and I
Wow.
was like, what is happening around me? Like, what is
That
this
does
everything?
something to a child, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. I remember my grandpa died when I was about 8. I had 2 grandpas at the time when I was still young, and I saw my dad cry. And to this day, the only thing that makes him cry is his parents. But I think
yeah,
that there's something it says something about that, you know? We are who we grow up with, and our parents are our very first like loves.
Definitely. And I have this question for you. So,
Mhm.
like, what is the education of being therapist is like? Like, what do they teach you?
Yeah. So you can become a therapist in California at least in 3 ways. You can get a master's in family therapy, marriage and family therapy. You can get a master's in social work, which is a lot more broad and holistic, which is the degree that I got. I have a bias towards my degree, obviously. And you can get a PhD, which is a doctorate degree specializing in psychology and things like that. But essentially, what they taught me in my 2-year program is how to think about the world, how to understand the world. My education taught me that we're part of a larger system, that the American system largely dictates who a human becomes. And so we become our environment. And so to conduct therapy then is to understand the environment, the family, the systems that an individual is a part of, and what systems are serving them and not serving them. So, for example, I come from a first generation immigrant family. I grew up in the Los Angeles Unified School District. I am a part of the city of Los Angeles. And so the rhythm of this city largely dictates the person I'm becoming. And
Hmm.
so oftentimes, someone who's not aware of the system that they're a part of cannot change their lifestyle if they're not aware that they're in water. There's a saying in sociology that says a fish doesn't know that they're in water.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand the chemical compounds that dictate the life that you're breathing in your ecosystem, you can't become aware. You can't reach self-awareness or nirvana, what have you, because you're not taking ownership of how those things affect you.
Hmm. And I was having the discussion with someone, and I still glance over this point of free will, like how much your surrounding affects you. And this was an interesting documentary I was watching on lead poisoning, like
Mhm.
how they used to use lead in everything, like from your fuel in your vehicles to your like oil paints and stuff like that. So how it dramatically affected like young brains and increased the crime rate in certain cities where there was a lot of pollution and cars and everything. And
Mhm.
once they stopped including lead in the fuel, it dramatically declined. So there was a straight correlation between that. So I think that
Wow.
if simple elements like this can change your way of living, it can fundamentally change your psychography. Like a person who's on the edge of committing crime, maybe that chemical makes their brain much more susceptible to committing a crime. So where's the free will here?
Mm. Like, where's the fable in the story?
No, I'm just asking like where's the free will? Is Are we free to do anything, or everything is bound by our surrounding, our whatever chemical imbalance goes through our
Oh,
mind?
like, where's our self-will
Yeah.
in our ecosystem? I think that it's the age-old argument of nature versus nurture,
Hmm.
right? Like, are we what we surround ourselves with, or are we what we're born with? And I think that, like, everyone has an answer to that question. Everyone thinks that they're right in that
Yeah.
answer. And it's interesting how when a serial killer, like, kills all these people, it becomes biology, and when someone becomes successful, it becomes who they surround themselves with, you
Yeah.
know? It's just, what narrative are you believing? And I think that for me, based on my own experience, I it was both. I come from a family of entrepreneurs on my dad's side. My mom comes from a large, like, family of, like, government employees and teachers and nurses. And so, how did I become a therapist? No one in my family is a therapist,
Hmm.
but there was inside of me, based on my experiences coming to this country, seeing that there was more than one shade of color, seeing that there was more than one faith. There created a curiosity inside of me from an early age. And so I think part of it is my parents are extremely kind people, and I had a really, really great childhood. It wasn't easy, but they raised me right. But another part of it is I wouldn't shut up and I wouldn't stop asking questions based on my experiences. I was also the first in my family to ever go to college in America. So there was a level of fear and anxiety, but I had no choice but to be courageous. So I think I lean more on the side of nurture than I do nature because I think that humans have the ability to decide what they want to do with their lives. We all inherently have a decision. If we hate our job, we can choose to stay or we can choose to leave, but we can't control our coworkers. So we have a decision when we're aware of that system. Like, oh, I'm aware that these group of friends are not good for me. Therefore, I can choose to stay and become like them, or I can leave. So I think ultimately the decision for nurturing for me, I choose to believe that because it's worked out for me. Like I am happier because of the decisions I feel like I've made. I don't think that I was forced to become a therapist or I was forced to become a creative entrepreneur. I believe that I chose that path based on my own interests.
Hmm. And I'm thinking of this analogy, and let me know if it fits here. It's like you're navigating, your life is like a ship, and you're just navigating through waters.
Mhm.
And whatever impact might winds have, might currents have, these are external factors. But in the end, you have control over your ship, and it's on
Mhm.
you, like where you want to steer toward.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the captain has the ability to like embody bravery into their
Hmm.
sailors based on experience and their decision to go valiantly into the ocean. You know, you can blame the ocean tides, but who was manning the ship? You know,
Yeah.
there's so many forces going on around us, but I think that there's something magnetic about humanity. Like, if you think about it, gorillas have no decision over what land they choose to stay in. They just
Hmm.
kind of migrate. Humans do. I can choose to live in Los Angeles. I can choose to live in Austin. I can choose to move to Hawaii if I wanted to. And so there's something beautiful about humans and our ability to interact with our ecosystem. You know, we can
Yeah.
change it.
It's a very weird shift, like when from moving from chimps to becoming human, and the
Hmm.
agency of action we had over the time. It's very weird, and the way we have changed our ecosystem, it's very weird. Like if you look in the vast scale of time we had, that life has been on Earth, it's been like very minute section slice of that time, and we have changed the world literally.
Mm.
So it's
We
very
have.
strange.
We have no other animals have done that, you know?
Yeah.
It's to our benefit and our curse. We've changed our roads, we've changed the way that we transport. We can go anywhere we want in less than a day. But we've also polluted and like the CO2 emissions and the gas and the cars and the fashion industry has led to this like massive pollution in our country. And so we have the power. Yeah.
It's very strange. And sometimes I think like who was much happier and had better like inner peace, the caveman who was like living from day to day, like just going hunting here and there,
Hmm.
or a modern person who has to worry about their job, their mortgage, their sorry about the background noise, it's the Diwali season here.
It's okay. I can hear it.
Yeah. So, who's much happier? A modern day person who has to worry about all these responsibilities and everything which he has created around himself, or a person who was just living in the cave and had to worry about like next meal only, nothing else.
Mm. I'm going to challenge that question because, like, there's the Plato's Cave. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the caveman who was living in the cave is the same person that becomes a cog in a factory wheel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point you want to break off of it. I think that like throughout history, we can't understand the future if we don't understand history.
Yeah.
Throughout history, there have been world shakers and world changers who have understood that they were in water and that they were part of a system and decided to change it. And I think that like we we don't become happy until we realize what's making us unhappy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that we have control over that. Because I think when we watch, how can I say this in a way that will prove my point in a very specific way? I started a new job this month working in a private practice in Los Angeles. And before that, I had very unhealthy work habits. I would go into work at 8 a.m. and I wouldn't leave until 8 p.m., 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then weekends I would spend sleeping. And then by the time I was done with that job, I had anxiety constantly for about 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
like unstoppable anxiety. I would get panic attacks. I would start to shut down because I was then feeling the aftershock of my overworking patterns. But I didn't know how unhappy I was until I got out, until I actually walked down the street without anything to do and I saw people's cars whizzing by and I started thinking to myself, I wonder how many of those people are just thinking of something else other than driving their car.
Yeah.
You know, we live in the city of Los Angeles, a city that is full of dreamers, filmmakers, writers, people who have dreams and ambitions, but how many minutes of our lives do we spend just wishing we were somewhere else or doing something else or being something else? And I think for a year and a half I was exhausted and tired because I thought that I was happy, you know, but I wasn't. And there's like an internal wisdom inside of us, I feel, when you wake up in the morning and you're exhausted and you're tired. I think there's a difference between someone who says, I have to do this, and someone who says, I have to do this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference in tone there where you do it out of the passion of your heart and you do something because you feel obligated to. And at some point, I think that like some people sadly never realize that.
Yeah. I think even thinking about this is a luxury for some people. Like just questioning
Yes,
this question.
yes, because most people are in survival. And I think it's a privilege. I live in the United States, a place where I don't have to think about going to the toilet or the clothes I'm going to wear or the food I'm going to eat. It's readily available to me.
Mm-hmm.
I work in an office building. Not many people have that privilege. Some people have to find free spaces to work. And I think we can get embedded, the human without resources can get embedded in survival. So they have no time. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need your basic needs met. And for me, like, I can only really talk about myself, but I didn't feel safe enough to even create until I did the work in therapy. You know, I had to do all of that work to realize how unhappy I was to get to where I am now. It takes years,
Yeah. And
you know.
I would like to ask, as a therapist, how your view has changed of the world. Like, have you given it a thought?
Mm.
Like before I was therapist, I used to think in certain way, but after
Mm.
I know and I have this training and everything and tools. So what has changed in your worldview?
Such a good question. I used to think I was right all the time. I, ever since I was little, I've always been the first person in class to raise my hand or to volunteer in class, and I would argue constantly. I would make my argument and I would criticize the person for not thinking that I was right. But being a therapist has taught me to sit and listen and really understand someone's story, where life is not about me at all. It's about being of service to others. And I've realized that I'm very small in this world of 8 billion people. Very, very small. And I could spend my life drumming my own beat in my drum and saying that I'm important, or I can choose to serve the next human who's struggling. And you don't know. You don't know who's struggling. Someone can look happy and live a beautiful life, and they get therapy too. And I've learned not to judge people ever. Like, just because I practice a certain faith or I embody a certain culture does not mean that I'm superior, you know? And I think that, like, I feel as if I've lived 10 lifetimes
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
this one lifetime because
Mm-hmm.
I've sat and heard people's stories. And there's in therapy, there's no one else but you and the client. The client is so vulnerable with you. They trust you. They sit, look into your eyes, and they give you their heart, and you can see that. And there's something beautiful about that relationship that you build with them. There's nothing else like it. And it's made me come alive in a way that I've never come alive before. Now I have no tolerance for bullshit. Like, I'm like, okay, stop bragging to me about how happy you are. I've learned that no one is truly 100% happy all the time. We all have shades of emotion, and it's helped me let go of my own perceptions of what I think I should be.
Yeah. And I think that's much more important. Like when you realize, like, I'm not perfect.
Yes.
And as you were saying about like being judgmental, I think it requires a conscious effort to not be judgmental, because the judgment comes very quickly. Like if you see a person, instinctively or biologically, you will quickly make assumptions about them, like
Mm,
threat perception and everything. Like, is he moving toward me? Is he hostile? Is he gonna
mm,
help me, or whatever it might be? But it
mhm,
takes a conscious effort. Like you have to think about it. Okay, so I'm making assumptions here. So this is a
mhm,
very it requires a lot of effort from your part. Like you have to be conscious about everything. Like, am I making a judgment here,
mm.
and am I being judgmental here?
That's right. That's very true. Even when I'm driving, like, Ankit, if you ever go to Los Angeles, the traffic here is awful, awful, awful. People crash their cars all the time. And even driving my car, I've had more compassion on people, like reckless drivers, people who are driving too slow, too fast. I've I've sat in the therapy chair so often that I'm like, "Oh, they're probably thinking about something." But also, I think to become an effective therapist, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest about your struggle. Um, to become fully licensed as a therapist, you have to go through supervision, and even licensed therapists go through supervision. And I love the therapeutic model of that because what happens is a therapist sits with another therapist and they're honest about what they're struggling with. I'm having a hard time understanding this client, or I don't think I'm good, or I don't think I'm competent. And you're honest about that. You just kind of let it go. And the beautiful thing about the therapeutic model is that you're supposed to never reach perfection. You're always learning, you're always growing. And I think that's one of the reasons I attribute that to my love of writing now and my love of podcasting and media creation. I'm a therapist who writes, I'm a therapist who podcasts because I think it's important for people to understand that you're never going to reach it. You're never going to get to the top of the mountain. The mountain is never ending. And once you reach the top becomes the bottom because you have another mountain to climb, you know? And I think that's beautiful because I don't think we should ever be finished.
It's a journey for sure.
Can I
And
ask you a question?
sure.
Yeah, I you're in the beginning of your career and we're
Hmm.
both very curious people, I've noticed. We're both in the future and we're both in Night Owl Nation.
Yeah.
I'm not in the future anymore because I want to save my money and Sunny only charges $5 a month.
Hmm.
But I'm curious about your own journey in your career because I feel like we're almost in parallel directions. We're not the same, but we're kind of going towards the same ambitions. And so I'm wondering how you're doing and what you're learning.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And sometimes I don't give it much a thought. Like I'm just enjoying my journey, because if I think too much about it, then I'll have a lot more expectations from certain person. And I think
Mm,
when you're doing business, expectations can be really helpful, but at certain time it can hamper you down,
mhm,
because you're expecting too much from. Let's say a lead comes to you and you're already making, like, having dreams about, if I close this lead, this will be the project and you will have this much income and stuff like that, and you will
mhm,
create wonderful stuff and it will look perfect. So but if you don't close that lead, you will feel like you have lost an opportunity, but the opportunity
mm,
was never there. They were just like a
mm.
flying wind, it came and gone.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to be able to, and still it's a work in progress, to not expect anything from someone.
How do you do that?
It's a very, like, it's a constant battle. You have to be
Do
like,
you have any practices? Do you do anything? Do you meditate before a meeting? Do you um, journal? Do you sit with yourself and conversate? What do you do?
I expect no. It's my first expectation. So even if I say, like, there's no expectation, but my first expectation, which I go with it, like, it's not going to work, and anything about that, it's like a plus point. So I already made my
Mm.
mind, like, I'm not going to close this client, and I don't even want to work with them. So that's my priority.
Oh, so you psych yourself out.
Yeah.
You're like, this door is already closed. And
Hmm.
because you don't care, you then become yourself and you develop relationship before it becomes a business transaction.
Yep. And I'm very conscious about, like, always tell them, like, if you at any point feel like this, we are not going to be a good fit, I will gladly recommend you to someone which I think could help you.
That's so
And
beautiful.
that helped me a lot. It's so easy to
Yeah.
talk about, but when you practice it, it really helps. Like, you go into a
Yeah.
meeting, you have no hidden agenda. You're just there to help them.
Mm,
And if you
that's
feel
so
like,
beautiful.
yeah, it takes some time, and you have to be slightly financially secure to be able to make that
Have a
recommendations.
savings and then do what
Yeah,
I'm saying to you.
definitely.
Yeah, that's so good, Ankit, because you know what I'm noticing about our interview? I'm noticing that this is the first time I've actually learned how to have a conversation with someone online or in a
Yeah,
podcast format. My conversation with you right now.
strange.
um, because I think we're all learning, we're always growing, right? And when I was first starting out, I thought I had to be perfect. I had to have a business plan. I remember closing my first like branding deal with Riverside and calling all of my friends saying, "How do I come up with a proposal? How do I
Hmm.
say that I want $1,000?" And my friend Larry, his name's Larry Roberts, he does podcasting as a business. He said to me, "You just have to be honest and tell
Yeah,
them that this is your very first brand deal and you need help. And if they don't understand or if they think that you're unprofessional, let it go because you don't want to work with someone that doesn't welcome honesty." And I remember going to that meeting and saying, "I have no idea what I'm doing." And she helped me. And I now, like, I'm so grateful for Riverside because I don't think I would have had that permission. But even then, it took me time to get used to getting to where you are as well. Like just being able to say, "Hey, if we're not a good fit, you have every reason to not take me on as your brand designer or brand person. Like we don't have to work together." But I think what that does for the client is you're not attached to them. You're not needy. You don't have that needy energy. And then it creates relationship where they're like, "Oh, I can be honest with Ankit.
yeah,
Ankit, I don't like this. Can we do something different? It looks bad." But I think that's such a good point, you know? But it takes practice, doesn't it? To
yep,
like
definitely.
get there.
Like I said, it's a conscious effort. You have to be like this, okay. So just like you have to psych yourself up before meeting, like, this is
Hmm.
not gonna work, and they will find something which might not be a good fit. So you have to be ready to walk away
Mm.
at any point. Like if they feel like certain things not working, if you can handle that objection and if you have genuine answers, then be honest about it. But if you ever feel
Mm,
like it can, because sometimes what happens, and I have had this experience, like you are too eager to close and you close the deal, but you later realize like we were not a good fit at all.
mm,
They had very
so
different
good.
expectations, and it's going to turn very toxic very soon. Like you'll have to do long hours just to make them happy.
Mm.
So to avoid that, be very conscious of who you're onboarding.
That should be your Night Owl Nation assignment prompt
Yeah.
answer. That's a really, really good, because the myth is say yes to every opportunity, right? Like you
Hmm.
should work with everyone, you should be a good person to work with all the time. But the truth is, you should be honest about your expectations and whether or not it's a good fit because it will lead to farther longevity in your career. And that's what a lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize. Like you end up hating your job or hating the creative journey because you never communicated in the first place about your expectations and your needs.
And I think here what matters that how much freedom you have over your choices. Let's say if you don't have any
Mm,
runway, and sometimes there will be things like you don't know how you're going to pay next month's bill.
mm,
So you have to now work, like take on any opportunity you get, and it happens. Like sometimes I have to work on something which I don't like, but I know these are going to pay my bills. So to develop that freedom, you have to be either, and there's always the choice, like how much you want to save and how much you want to spend. Like if you are building runway, then can you live within your means and know like how to survive on bare minimum.
mm,
So that practice, then it gives you freedom. Like I know with the savings I have, I can survive for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, and even 1 year if I live frugally.
mm,
So for that freedom, you have to have that control. So then you are more open to opportunities, and you can then objectively look at upon opportunity and be like, are we a good fit or not? Or sometimes what
mm,
happens, like you will take on an opportunity and it will take you a whole time. Then something better comes in and you are like, I have no time for this opportunity and I've already made my commitment.
mm.
So yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. I'm struggling with that actually. Just like knowing that like you have to prepare for the worst. And I
Hmm.
think you have that in innately, like your ability to say, okay, like if things go to shit or if things go bad, like I can always just I have a savings. I have money left over. And I don't know if you started your did you start your business this year?
It should be around 1.5 year.
Okay, 1.5 years.
Yeah.
I started my business in May, my consulting business. I am still learning.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a balance you need to have of, okay, I can spend this money. For so long, I was afraid to spend the money that I was earning in consulting. And then one day, my mic stopped working or my XLR
Hmm.
cable stopped working. And I went to a music store and I asked for a microphone and I paid for it. And I was like, I don't have to use my credit card for this. I actually have a savings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a balance because I think no one is going to be harder on you than yourself. No one is going to take care of you more than you take care of yourself. So it's like you have to have that conversation with yourself. And I don't think people teach you that in business, do they?
Maybe not to this extent, because everyone, it's gonna be very specific for every person, like where they're coming from. And I think for me, my first dollar was like a confidence booster to me. When I got
Yes.
my first dollar, it was like, yeah, I'm on
It's
the correct
such a
path.
good feeling.
Yeah.
The I remember making $60 for an email newsletter. Someone subscribed for a year, my private email newsletter. And I remember I had this biggest smile on my face, and it was only 60 bucks.
Yeah.
I can make more of that in an hour in my full-time job. But I was so happy because it was my money.
Yeah.
I wasn't working for anyone. I was working for myself. And there's nothing like that. It's like, and I think that's how you know you're a true entrepreneur. when you want to make your own money, when you're proud of making your own living. It's like there's nothing like that feeling. I always go back to that moment. Yeah.
It
How
can
much
be
money
a
did you make
a
your
very
first
strange
deal?
question. My first deal, it was $50.
That's so cool. You and me are the same. I was only
Yeah,
10 bucks above you with inflation, I guess. But yeah,
and even
sorry to
it
interrupt you.
was a gift. Like
It's
it was
the
free. I was
best.
just doing for the free, and they enjoyed my work and they were like, "You deserve this." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." Then I think I should make a career in this because this is the first time I'm getting paid for something.
I did this for free and I got paid, and that's when I knew I wanted to get paid for it.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. Do okay, so some people don't subscribe to this, but there are people who say do it for free until you can't anymore. Would you say that that's true for creatives who are like working full time?
It depends. Like there's always gonna be some transaction. If it's
Hmm.
not money, it's something else, and you have to quantify that. Like even the dollar amount, how much is this transaction gonna help me in terms of
Mm.
experience, in terms of portfolio piece, in terms of maybe getting new connections. So let's say
Hmm.
I was talking with someone and they said if you think like big companies like Spotify or even bigger brands, if you think they're gonna pay a lot, it's very rare.
Mm.
Like they will try to undercharge an artist and take advantage of their brand name. Like they say like it will look good on your portfolio, so you should reduce your price, and people do that because they want that brand affiliation.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's
So
always a cost to
yep.
everything. That's so true. I think I wrote an episode about that, but I think I want to create another one with that amount of detail.
Hmm.
So good.
Yeah, opportunities are never free. You have to give it a cost. It can take your time, it can cost you money, but it will always there always be a cost.
Mm. That's my quote of the week. There will always be a cost. Always, whether it's financial. But my mind, when I think of cost, because I don't want to generalize, is money.
Hmm.
But I think you made such an amazing, amazing point where it's not about, it's not always about cost. It can also be emotional cost, physical cost, relational cost. What is your gain and what is your benefit or what is your loss? Is it a net positive or is it a net negative? I remember Sunyi told this story, I think. Was it? I think I was listening to the podcast you did with him
Hmm.
where he was talking about doing Gabby Bernstein's website.
Yeah.
Was it your episode?
Yep.
For nothing. But
Hmm.
it like gave him his life back because he realized, like, oh, I want to work with personal brands more than big brands. And he had worked with Spotify at that point and like Pelican cases, but working with Gabby made him realize that he wanted to promote other people's message,
Yeah.
you know? And I think at some point, like, you have to think about all the costs. Is this going to benefit me or is this going to hurt me? Such a good point.
And definitely, I think it. And I've realized this slowly, like as I'm growing in my career, like it will never be perfect. Like if you think like after this client, I will scale up and I will go for a bigger client. And if I follow this path, it is going to be everything is going to be perfect. And if I have everything arranged perfectly, like my business in line, my website is looking fantastic, I have perfect case
Mm.
studies. It is never going to be perfect. There will going to be some cases where you have to take work just to pay bills, or there's going to be cases where which you think thought as a good client, they're going to be complete a-holes. So it's never going to be perfect, and you have to be ready for that. I think
Yeah,
that's where managing expectations come. Like how do you manage your expectations and the expectations clients have with you?
mm, mm. Well, for you, what's your approach? Do you talk about it in the beginning? Like, what are your expectations for this project? These are my expectations. Do you just say it like that?
I just say I have this. I follow this like always under promise and over deliver.
Mm,
Like promise less, like promise the bare minimum. Like the judging based on the time and budget we have, I'm gonna be able to do this. If you could do
mm.
100, promise them 80 at the least, because you never
Wow.
know how circumstances might change. You
Hmm.
might get sick, something weird might happen. So you have to account for that also. And I think that's the cost of business.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to think about all aspects.
Mhm.
And that's the thing about, like, have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
I have read up to the point where he was like about investing money. And when I
Hmm.
was reading that, I had no money. So I was like, I don't even have money. So why should I read about investing?
I love the very beginning chapters because they're the ones I remember the most. Because I come from an immigrant family, a lot of it, I'm also Asian. And so, like, there's something in America called the model minority myth, where you keep your head down, you just do a good job. And so that was my perspective in reading that book in the beginning. I'm just going to be the best employee this company has ever seen. But there's something in the chapter that said, you can make 30 cents or you can wait 3 years and learn all of the tools necessary to make 10, maybe 30 times more than what you'd be making as my employee. You have a decision. And I remember thinking, like, that's me. I am satisfied with the 30 cents an hour because it's going to give me immediate benefits. And most people are trained to become an employee. Not many people are trained to think like an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
where you have to think about what are the long term costs and benefits. Is this going to help me make more money, even if I don't make any right now? And I think you make such a good point where there's always a cost to everything, but there's always a price to everything too.
Yeah.
There's a price that we have to pay to get that education, whether or not it's not making any money for a couple of years. And that's business, isn't it? Your first year in business, you're probably going to make nothing,
Hmm.
but you're going to learn everything to build the
Yeah.
foundation to make more. And I think that's such a beautiful journey because you have to be able to think 30 years into the future.
Definitely. And in the mental health space and even in coaching and self help space, I find this disconnect. Let's say there's a person who talks about like how you should be selflessly giving to everyone and be do not have any expectations and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
in the end, they charge $5,000 for that course. So I'm like, where's the selfless giving part here? And it might be my relationship with money. It might be different
Sure.
for someone else. But when I think like, do you really have to charge $20,000 for just a group coaching? Or so I find the like the separation between their message and the way of operating.
Hmm.
And on bigger extent, I have noticed here in religious leaders, and it's a very
Hmm.
interesting story. Like I will just listen to someone here and they are giving lecture on how money is sin, like it's sinful, like to follow money is like doing some kind of sin, and
Uh-huh.
it's not a good practice to seek interest and stuff like that. And I'm like, then why do you charge 5 lakh for 5 lakh rupees for this single session?
Yeah. It's so
If
interesting.
you are into carelessly giving and you are a person of God and you're just here to communicate His message, so why are you charging money if you say that money is like root of all the evil? So why do you
Mm.
want this part of evil? And they will go all around the loops answering this question. But I want to understand from you, like, have you found this and have you found this disconnect?
Oh, yeah. I've had my own journey with trying to understand money because I grew up, well, I am Christian, but I'm starting to read the Bible for myself. And part of it is like some people can be, there's a difference between making money and having greed, where you're driven by money.
Hmm.
Whereas there is a difference between people that are driven by money and people that serve and then get money. Understand?
Yeah. Hmm.
So I think there's a verse in the Bible that like says, people love a generous giver, someone who is what, and then there's like more about how to manage your money, because there's the belief that like everything you have comes from God and God is generous in giving. But I think that like there's also a moral compass as to like how much you do charge for people, you know?
Yeah.
Like for me, yes, I need to make money to live, period. Like I do. Not going to lie about that. But I don't think I would ever charge someone who has very little means 3 times what they would need to make in a month to live.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why I really admire Sunyi, because the education I feel like we're getting from him is the education most people charge $50,000 a year for in a regular 4 year college system. But he understands that most people don't have those means, but the power of storytelling can help anyone in any career. And so for me, like I do charge money to businesses that have the means, but
Hmm.
if I really do believe in their message, it the cost for me is just being able to serve someone who is in my position, because I'm passionate about serving first generation immigrants, and like I'm also passionate about serving creatives, and most creatives don't have money, you
Yeah.
know? They're learning to make money, but they don't have the means yet. And so I actually serve at a company called TBH Mental Health that serves college students for free, but I get paid by them because the schools pay them.
Hmm.
And so for me, I'd rather get funded by the institutions and like work a full-time job if I could do that with the rest of my time. So I think that you ultimately, what I'm saying is the individual has to look within themselves and understand where their moral compass is and what they're there to do and to serve, because you can get so caught up in making money that you forget the reason why you started doing it in the first place. And
Yeah.
Austin Kleon says this too. He's like, when you start making money from what you love doing, inevitably there's a cost to that, because you're making money, you have to think about how else you're going to make money if that becomes your full-time gig. And
Hmm.
so for him, I don't think a lot of people know this. He was a librarian when he was starting Steal Like an Artist and Keep Going. And he didn't want to make money from his books. He just wanted to write. And I think that that's the perspective I go with. Like, if I make money with this, okay, cool. But my first ever goal and like the desire of my heart is to serve people first. And if someone decides out of the generosity of their heart that they want to pay me for my services, cool. You know, that's sort of my approach to it, because the population I'm serving, I acknowledge that they don't always have the means.
Yeah. And I think money is for me is just like a basic commodity, like food, like water. Like if you look for what you need, and if you're content with it, let's say, like if you don't overeat, and if you like don't over earn and don't overcharge someone, as you said, so it's a perfect thing. And I think the relationship with money is the most important thing when you're running a business. Like, how's your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with your money? And it really affects how you charge and
Mm-hmm.
how you spend.
That's right. I've heard people say this, and I think this is very true. Making more money doesn't create greed. Making more money reveals more of who you are.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference between Warren Buffett and, I don't want to name any other millionaires because I don't want to call anyone out, but like they are who they already were. It's just money
Hmm.
made them more of who they are, you know?
Yeah.
Like Sarah Blakely, she founded Spanx at 27. She's one of my all-time favorite people because she started a nonprofit with her money, helping female entrepreneurs and coaching them and helping them grow. And she has 4 kids, and she doesn't take them to first class. She takes them on economy class.
Hmm.
And so she it just made her more of who she was as a person, a giving, generous individual. But there are people who make more money and they corrupt and they tear down and they use their means to get revenge or to be the best. But I think that was already who they were,
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know? Yeah.
Oops. Yeah. The money is just to multiply. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And wow, what's an awesome conversation. I really like this conversation. And
Me too. I recorded it on my recorder. I'm gonna publish it.
awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
please
Send me
let
the
us know. Yeah, I will send you the video. But please let us know like where we can find you and how to reach out to you.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at the Helen Garcia. My podcast is called Think Weird. It's helping creative entrepreneurs become more of who they were and unlock authenticity for themselves. So you can go to thinkweird.co. And I also write a daily newsletter, but you can find that on my website. So
Awesome.
that's who I am.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for joining. It was, I hope this was helpful to you.